Hey everyone, really quick before today's episode gets started, I want to tell you about the exciting new TCG Player subscription. This subscription comes with a ton of perks. First up, when you're subscribed and you order through Direct, your orders ship first. And also when you order through Direct, you get free shipping with absolutely no order minimum. On top of that, you get extra bonus bucks that's up to 3% store credit on all of your orders. So with that, the longer that you're subscribed, the better that it gets. Starting on day 1 of subscribing, you earn 1% back. After 3 months, you get 2% back. And after 1 year, you get that incredible 3% back. And on top of that, there are even subscriber-only kickback promotions. The TCG Player subscription is just $6.99 a month, and actually, if you subscribe today using my promo code and you're one of the first 500 people to subscribe, well, for that first month, you're going to get that $6.99 back in store credit, so make sure you use my promo code QUARTERS. Again, this is only for the first 500, so if you're interested, make sure you subscribe utilizing that promo code QUARTERS. So, yesterday we had some really exciting spoilers, including my final episode of the day on Bale, Lord of Murder, and yeah, that's the name, Lord of Murder, and that's what this commander wants to do. But don't leave to check out that episode just yet, because on this episode, I've got a commander that I think a lot of players are going to sleep on, and I am urging you, please, please, please do not sleep on this commander. So to find out what this commander does, well, let's jump into it. So Mahadi Emporium Master is a 3/3 cat devil, because that's a thing that costs 1 black-red. It has, at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each creature that died this turn. So again, this uncommon commander is one that, well, just has a simple line of text, but the amount of potential this commander has is huge. Now, the way that this is worded is pretty interesting, because there is a limitation in that this just counts your end step, not every single end step, which is probably pretty reasonable, but also on top of that, it doesn't limit this to just your creatures, and it doesn't specify non-token creatures, both of which are huge factors. And actually, one other thing to point out with this commander is that, well, it doesn't matter if Mahadi actually sees those creatures die. Meaning that a ton of creatures can get wiped out during your turn, and then, after all of that happens and the dust settles, you play this commander, you go to your end step, and then you still count those creatures that died. It doesn't have to see them actually die. So again, although there is that limitation that this only counts your end step and not every single end step, that's kind of the only limitation on this commander, and because of that, yeah, you can make an absurd amount of treasures, which of course is absurdly powerful. And there are plenty of ways to use and abuse those treasures, of course, outside of mana, and we'll talk about those here in a bit. And really quick, before we jump into the cards that work well with this commander, in the description below there is a link to the list of these cards, because, well, sometimes when, a new commander gets spoiled, cards that work well with it tend to go up in price. So because of that, if you're interested in building around this commander, it's sometimes a good idea to pick up some cards sooner rather than later. But now with all that said, let's jump into it. So the first card that came to my mind when I saw Mahadi was Gadrick the Crown Scourge, actually another commander and one that works in a somewhat similar but much more limited way. It's a 5/4 flying dragon for 2 and a black, and it says it can attack unless you control 4 more artifacts, and most importantly, at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each non-token creature that died this turn. So, sure, you get some extra power and toughness, and it flies. It is the exact same mana cost, but you don't get access to black, and again, this one is much more limited. Obviously, this is limited because it can't attack, but more importantly, it is limited because it does specify non-token creature, which makes a big difference, and obviously not having access to black makes a big difference as well. So yeah, I can definitely see Mahadi having a lot more potential than Gadrick and seeing a lot more play. That being said, yeah, Gadrick can also fit in a Mahadi deck as well, essentially doubling up on your treasure tokens from those non-token creatures dying. But of course, one big factor that you're going to want to consider when it comes to Mahadi is protecting it, because, well, we're going to get into a few board wipes, and you're going to want to wipe the board with this commander because you can make a ton of treasures, but when you do wipe the board, sometimes you are going to end up destroying your own commander, and you don't want that. So you can utilize a card like Professor's Warning, which for just 1 mana says, choose 1, put a +1 counter on target creature, or more importantly, target creature gains indestructible until end of turn. So for just 1 mana, keeping your commander in play, yeah, that's going to pay itself off, and then some. Next up, Daring Fiend Bonder is a 5/1 with haste and attacks each combat if able, so this is probably going to get taken out at some point, which actually is a good thing because when it's in your graveyard, it has pay 1 and a black, exile it from your graveyard, put an indestructible counter on target creature, activates ability only time you cast a sorcery. So for just 2 mana, we can permanently protect our commander, and of course that is a very impactful thing. And of course, when it comes to indestructibility, there are some more expensive cards out there, like, some equipment like a Darksteel Plate or, I believe Shield of Kaldra, one of the Kaldra things, but yes, there are also budget options as well. Another type of card to consider, though, is one like Feign Death, which is an instant for a black that says, until end of turn, target creature gains. When this creature dies, return to the battlefield, tap their opponent's control, a +1 counter on it. We have been getting more and more of these cards lately to the point where we have just a glut of them, and yes, each and every single one of them can be fantastic in this kind of a deck. Again, for just 1 mana, you're essentially saving your commander from a board wipe, or, again, getting taken out in any other way, like maybe an Edict effect, which we also probably will run in this kind of a deck, and we'll get to some here in a bit, or, some -1/-1 counters, or something like Languish that gives -4/-4, and yeah, these cards are very flexible and can actually help us use and abuse some ETBs as well. Regardless, again, the point is that we keep our commander in play or get it back into play so that we can just make sure that we are getting a ton of treasures. So again, obviously, although these cards, do cost mana to utilize, we are going to be getting that mana back and then some. Now, when it comes to Wrath effects in black, well, basically, Black Wrath of God is Damnation, which, is a $30 card. And yes, that would work very well with this commander. Again, with this, in some way to protect your commander, you're essentially like, okay, we'll pay 4 mana, plus, maybe again 1 for something like Feign Death, and I will destroy all creatures on the board. Okay, that was what, 15 creatures or so? Cool, my commander comes back, 15 treasures, end step, awesome, thank you so much. In a way, Wrath spells in this deck are, obviously a great way to control the board, but also kind of like massive rituals. And of course, outside of Damnation, there are plenty of other great Wraths out there. I mean, again, you've got access to red for damage-based board wipes, and black for, awesome board wipes as well. We even have some creature-based board wipes that can actually keep our commander in play with cards like Rakdos, Reaver Demon, and Dread Cacodemon. Rakdos the Showstopper is a 6/6 Flampling Demon that has, when it enters the battlefield, flip a coin for each creature that isn't a demon, devil, or imp. Destroy each creature whose coin comes up tails. So again, as I mentioned, it might be kind of strange, but our commander is a cat devil, so we don't have to flip a coin for it, and it will survive. And of course, our opponents most likely won't have any demons, devils, or imps, so, well, they are probably going to lose out on, about half their creatures. And again, like I mentioned earlier, this can be a fantastic card to use and abuse with something like Feign Death because, well, we have an ETB that we can get again and again and again. Moving on, an ETB that we unfortunately cannot use and abuse with something like Feign Death, let's talk about Reaver Demon. It has, when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, destroy all non-artifact, non-black creatures that can't be regenerated. So this can wipe out the vast majority of creatures on the board while keeping our commander safe. And then Dread Cacodemon is an 8/8 demon that has, when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, destroy all creatures your opponents control, then tap all other creatures you control. So essentially a one-sided board wipe on a creature, again, not an ETB that we can use and abuse, but one that we can just, get when we cast it. Now it does cost 10 mana, and Reaver Demon does cost 8. Both are very expensive to cast, but again, with this commander, we're not going to have mana issues once we get things going. In fact, again, with each of these, again, there is the potential to gain even more mana than we put into them. And actually, there are other fantastic board wipes that can keep our commander in play as well, in one way or another, with Necromantic Selection, In Garruk's Wake, and Plague Wind. Necromantic Selection says, draw creatures and return a creature card put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. It's a black zombie addition to other colors and types. Exile Necromantic Selection. So this wipes out all creatures on the board, including our own, but again, we can just say, okay, yeah, my commander is going to be the creature I bring back, and again, it does not matter. If our commander, left and came back, we still get the treasure tokens for all the creatures that died. And ironically, it's going to count itself in that total. Next up, In Garruk's Wake is, of course, a fantastic board wipe. It's a sorcery that says, destroy all creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control. And then Penguin is very similar, exact same mana cost at 7 black, so all creatures you don't control that can't be regenerated. So again, one-sided board wipes that can just wipe out our opponent's boards entirely, and then also just gain us a ton of treasures at the end step, and of course also just, leave things open for us to swing through as well. Next up, we've got some repeatable effects that can be incredibly deadly with this commander with cards like Pestilence and Pyrohemia. These are essentially the exact same card, but one's in black and one's in red, and let's just use Pyrohemia as an example since it's newer. And its text is probably slightly more accurate on the card. Regardless, it says at the beginning of the end step, if no creatures are on the battlefield, sacrifice Pyrohemia. Pay a red, it deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. Pestilence is essentially the exact same thing, but you're going to pay a black to do that. So these essentially can just be repeatable board wipes, again, of whatever, value we want them to be. And if we've got a way to keep our commander in play, whether that's indestructibility or whatnot, these can be incredibly impactful. Because, of course, we can just keep dumping a ton of mana into them, including treasures, and these can even be a finisher as well at a certain point. If, we're at the highest life total and we've got an absurd amount of treasures, we could probably just dump enough mana into these to take all of our opponents out. And even when we're not doing that, obviously, these can just be a great way to generate a ton of treasures for us. I mean, just think about the scenario if you're playing against a player who maybe even just has, a token deck. They've got a lot of tiny, 1/1 or 2/2 tokens. Just pay a couple mana, take out all those tokens, and yeah, generate an absurd amount of treasures on the end step. Moving on, of course, I did mention that we can also utilize Edict effects very effectively in this deck with cards like Plaguecrafter, Bonus Hunger, and Necrotic Hex. Plaguecrafter says when it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, each player who can't discards a card. So with all players sacrificing a creature, including ourselves, that is 4 creatures that died this turn, and we can just sacrifice the Plaguecrafter to itself, and there you go. We just made 4 treasures at the end of the turn for a 3 mana creature, and we got rid of 3 of our opponent's creatures. And speaking of 3 mana, one way to just absolutely decimate our opponent's boards and make a ton of treasures is Bonus Hunger. It's an instant that has Ascend, and it says each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you have the City's Blessing instead, each opponent sacrifices half the creatures they control, rounded up. In Commander, especially with a deck like this, it's incredibly easy to get the City's Blessing, so yeah, each opponent's going to sacrifice half their army, and for just 3 mana instant speed, we're going to make a ton of treasures. Though again, I do say instant speed, but technically again, you do have to do this during your turn if you want to get that trigger from your commander, so keep that in mind. Next up, how about Necrotic Hex, which is going to make each player sacrifice 6 creature, and then we create 6 tap 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So first up, this is pretty much just going to decimate every player's board, probably including our own, but that is completely fine because again, we've got those Feign Death type of cards to actually get our commander back with this. And then again, on top of that, we're going to make 6 zombies, which can just be fantastic, through combat, or also just, if we do another board wipe at some point, that's 6 treasures for us. So this can be a fantastic card to generate us treasures, and a card to generate future treasures too. We can also take advantage of creatures dying, though, with cards like Crowded Crypt, Ghoulish Procession, and Rise of the Dread Marn. Crowded Crypt is a fantastic mana rock for this deck. It says whenever a creature you control dies, put a corpse counter on Crowded Crypt. And then by paying 4 black, and tapping and sacrificing it, we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed for each corpse counter on Crowded Crypt. Again, we don't really care all that much that these zombies have Decayed on them, and in fact, sometimes that can be a good thing because when we attack with them, they are sacrificed at the end of combat. So, over the game, we're going to build up a lot of counters on this. Then when we do choose to sacrifice it, well, we get a zombie army, and, we could just swing out with them to deal out a lot of damage, and also to make sure that we sacrifice them and make a ton of treasure tokens at the end step. Moving on, a small enchantment, one that can put in a lot of work throughout the game is Ghoulish Procession. It says whenever 1 or more non-token creatures die, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. This ability triggers only once each turn. So again, keep in mind this does trigger on our opponent's turns as well, so as creatures just, naturally die throughout the game, great, we get more and more tokens. And of course, we can make an absurd amount of tokens for a very, very, very minimal investment with Rise of the Dread Marn. It has Foretell for just a black, and it says create X 2/2 black zombie berserker creature tokens or X the number of non-token creatures that died this turn. So even just after one of our wraths, we can then cast this and say, okay, for every single non-token creature that died, yeah, I'm going to make a massive amount of zombies. Keep in mind, obviously, this counts your opponent's creatures as well, so have fun with that. Yeah, this can be a finisher, and again, also just another way to generate an absurd amount of treasures. Speaking of which, one of the first cards that came to my mind when I saw this commander was Tyrannic Resonator, an artifact for 2, pay 2, tap, copy target triggered ability you control, you may choose targets for the copy. Again, our commander's ability is a triggered ability, so have fun doubling it up with this. For 2 mana, doubling up those treasures after a board wipe, yeah, is gonna be well worth it. And of course, if you've got the budget for it, the aforementioned does that and then some. It's 2-mana activation, it can copy activated or triggered abilities. It's 3-mana activation, it can copy instant or sorcery spells, and it's 4-mana activation, copy a permanent spell you control. Obviously, each of these modes are fantastic, but obviously the one that I'm going to highlight is that first one because doubling treasures, who doesn't want to do that? And of course, we've got plenty of ways that we can finish off our opponents with a deck like this. I mean, the first one that came to my mind was Emporium Master, and this is going to be incredibly deadly, incredibly quickly with this commander. It's a 1/3 with Fabricate 3. Whenever an artifact you control is put in a grave from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Emporium Master's power. So, when we get those 3 counters on this, this has 4 power, and just by sacrificing a single treasure, we drain an opponent for 4. So, yeah, we can easily drain out at least one opponent once we get this into play. But we can also ping our opponents down with those treasures without even losing them with Gearpoor Aether Grid. It says tap 2 untapped artifacts you control. Gearpoor Aether Grid deals 1 damage to our creature or player. With the amount of treasures that we can generate, yeah, that can be a ton of damage very quickly. And of course, with all the creatures that we're wiping out, well, something like Bastion of Remembrance can really come in handy as well. It has when it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 human soldier creature token, which is lovely, and on top of that, whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. Now, obviously, there are other effects like this one, like, kind of Blood Artist type effects, but keep in mind, obviously, if you have those effects on a creature, and you're counting on board wipes to actually drain your opponents out, unless you've got a lot of ways to protect those creatures as well on top of your commander, you're getting those as one-off effects, which still can be incredibly potent, obviously. That being said, an enchantment like this one obviously is going to survive your creature-based board wipe, so yeah, definitely consider something like this. And speaking of enchantments and winning with them, well, Revel in Riches. I think this card has gotten pretty expensive at this point, but if you want to win with an alternative win condition, go for it. It says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a treasure token, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. So this not only doubles up the treasures that you're making from taking out your opponent's creatures, but it also is like, hey, if you have 10, which is incredibly easy to get to, and you happen to get to your upkeep of this in play, you just win. So yeah, that is incredibly easy as long as this stays in play to get to 10 treasures. So yeah, I think Mahadi Emporium Master is a very interesting commander, one that I think players are going to sleep on. I think that just really happens for a lot of commanders out there if they see, that uncommon symbol on the commander. Just immediately, it's only got 1 line of text, there can't really be much to this, I'll just ignore it. But of course, there are plenty of powerful uncommon commanders out there, and this one, I think, definitely has a ton of potential. Now, that being said, something I probably should mention is if you are doing, board wipe deck, there are certain playgroups that don't want to play against that when you're running, 15 or so board wipes in your deck. I mean, I definitely learned that lesson when, I just started playing Commander and I built my Selenia Dark Angel deck, which had quite a few board wipes, and players really didn't enjoy losing their creatures again and again and again. So make sure if you are planning on building a 15 board wipe deck around this commander that you check with your playgroup first. That being said, again, if you're planning around building this commander, make sure you check out that link in the description below that's got a list of these cards, because again, when an exciting new commander is spoiled, sometimes prices do tend to go up. And of course, make sure that you're staying tuned to this channel for even more exciting quick takes. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.